We're sure glad everyone stayed Bible study. We have a treat here in the auditorium this morning. Our brother Corey Burns is visiting with us. And Corey is the director of the Ames program at Sunset, and in which we have partnered with them. Hopefully, Lord willing, next year, we will have Ames students here to help our college ministry, our SOC group. I don't know what Corey's going to speak on this morning, but I'm sure he's very dynamic. Corey's one of those, he's a unique individual. And he was an aimer himself, and he can tell you a little bit about that, and maybe a little bit about what the program does, if you have questions or whatever, why. But it's kind of overwhelming. Last year, when I mentioned to Corey, Tim about Bible Bowl, they made a trip all the way from Lubbock, Texas, to be with us. And that kind of impressed me. Horace and I, we talked about it several times. Why would you come all the way from Lubbock, Texas, to Cookeville, Tennessee, to just be at Bible Bowl? Well, this time before Bible Bowl, Corey calls me and he says, "Hey, we're going to come to Bible Bowl." And I said, "Okay, you're more than welcome." And the thing is, his sole job is recruiting students, and which we gave him the floor over there yesterday. But we're just so thankful for Corey's energy, his walk with Christ, and his ability to encourage others. And I'm sure you're going to be encouraged this morning. But he's one of those, he's a fire plug. I told Joy the first time I met him, went home, I really like him. And I guess it's one of those things where he just kind of gravitates. But Corey, come and say what you need to, brother. And we appreciate you being here. And tell Tim that we missed him this morning. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here. I had to change my lesson during the sermon because they asked me to talk about how Gary could be a better person. And then all of the times, like, you focus on you, don't focus on others. I'm like, well, now I have to change my lesson because that's not what it's about. I am excited to be with you this morning. I work with Adventures and Missions, and we have begun a partnership with Sycamore, and I look forward to see what God has in store for us. We travel around all over the United States and even around the world, and it creates opportunities for us to really focus on what is the next generation of the church going to be. Really, that's what our focus is as we work with AIM. Our students are from the ages of 18 to 25. The bulk of our students come to us straight out of high school, although in recent years, we've been getting students that right when they graduate from college, they come to work with us. But we're an apprentice missionary program that works with our students from August to April. And in that time, they go through a lot of study and preparation. And then around the middle of May, they start arriving to different fields all around the world. One of the things that we say to our students is we're not just focused on what you're going to be doing as an AIM student. We're focused on what are you going to be doing in the kingdom 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We used to talk about students making a sacrifice for the kingdom. And I believe that's true. When these young men and women step out in faith and they say, I want to be used by God, and they get trained and we send them to different locations around the world, it is true that they're making a sacrifice for the kingdom. But I had a student several years ago, he said, I don't really see it so much as a sacrifice that I'm making it. I see it as an investment in who I'm going to be as a Jesus follower for the rest of my life. You see, how many people have an opportunity to say, straight out of high school for the most part, I'm going to take time to go into intensive training for 8 months, And then I'm going to go to another location, whether it be domestic or international, and I'm going to work side by side with this missionary or with this campus minister or with this preacher for a minimum of 14 months, and then I'm going to use that for the rest of my life. What we've seen in our students, we've had over 2,000 students go through AIM now. We had our 50th anniversary last year, and it was exciting to have a big celebration. And really the interesting thing for me whenever we started to look at, well, what are our students doing? And about 20% of our students, after they graduate, they stay in ministry. So they're staying in youth ministry, as missionaries, as preachers, as family ministers, children's ministers. That's 20%. But 80%, they continue on into the workforce. They go to college, they have their careers, and some people have asked me, they said, well, doesn't that seem kind of depressing to you that only 20% are staying in full-time ministry? And I said, I don't really feel depressed about it, because this 80% who are going into congregations all over the United States, they know how to share the gospel. They're Bible class teachers. They're really involved in congregations. And so we're being a blessing even beyond, and that's what's creating a positive future for different aspects of the church. I'm really encouraged being here at Sycamore, and I travel around to a lot of congregations, and lots of congregations that I visit are declining. They don't have the membership that they had before. They don't have the faithfulness that was involved before, and I don't see that here at Sycamore. What I see is a very vibrant place for young people to grow. And whenever I saw this, we began talking to the elders and said, man, what would it look like for us to even use Sycamore as one of our AIM locations? Because really the best environment to put somebody in a place to grow is a good and healthy environment for them to be. Do you agree with that? And so we started talking about what would it look like if we sent a team to come work with Scott Jeffcoat. And the idea is not that they're a fully trained instrument ready to be unleashed, but they have some training. They have grown in their Bible knowledge, but they're ready to enter into a new phase of going into ministry, but having somebody to walk with them as they go in that. And so we're planning to send a team here this next May, and they would be working under the oversight of Scott as he works over the oversight of the elders. And the idea is for them to work in the SOC, but get that mentorship that is going to continue to raise them up for years to come. One of the things that was really encouraging to me is Kevin, as he and I got to spend time together. Kevin, people began talking about Kevin all the time whenever he was working with the youth and so forth. And they started talking about all the people that Kevin have mentored that are working in other congregations across Tennessee and other places. And I'm like, that is a healthy thing for young people to have good mentorship, to get that training, and then to continue on in other places. And well, the Aimers make fun of me because I overuse this verse, and I don't apologize for it because it's such a good verse. But Ephesians 3:20, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. What we tell our AIM students is our job is to ask and imagine, and God's job is to do immeasurably more. And that's what we see God doing all the time within our ministry. And so we're talking about, let's just send a team to work here in Cookeville and let Scott mentor them. And I'm thinking, man, God's going to laugh at that and say, well, really, let's just start other campus ministries in other parts of the United States through the mentorship that's taken place here. AIM began back in 1973. And a lot of people think it was like this real smart director that said, hey, let's start a program that's going to reach out to young people. But the truth is, there were young people that were studying in the university ministry at the Sunset Church of Christ in Lubbock, Texas. They went to the elders and they said, we want to help this missionary in Dublin, Ireland. And the elders had never done anything like this before, and they said, well, we see your face, so let's see what we can do. So they started having some night classes, and in those night classes, They trained them, and then they sent 17 young men and women to Dublin, Ireland to work with Tony Coffey. And that was the very first AIM team. It wasn't even called AIM back then. It was the group of young kids who are working with Tony Coffey to go to Dublin, Ireland. And somebody, I believe it was a guy named Nat Cooper, who's still around, he said, well, let's just call it AIM. And so the name Adventures and Missions was born. But one of the things that we talk about, and even as I mentioned that passage in Ephesians 3:20, what if those young people just said, wouldn't it be neat, but they just didn't do anything? We wouldn't be here having this conversation that we're having right now. You see, the faith of what those young men and women did, it just didn't turn into something that they did one time. They did it again, and then they sent another team, and then they said, well, what would happen if we sent him to multiple places? So then they began sending them to multiple places. And so based on the faith of these young men and women over 50 years ago who said, we want to do something, God said, you know what? Because they didn't see it becoming what it would become. They just said, we want to do this one time. But what God did is he took that and he said, I'm going to make that immeasurably more than what you could ever ask or imagine. And so presently, 50 years later, we've sent AIM students to 49 different nations and into over 200 mission points all across the world. We've sent AIM students to 33 states in the United States. And I think, man, wow, isn't that incredible that God could take the faith of young people so many years ago and begin to multiply it over and over again. There's a thing that goes on with these young people. How many of you guys think that that an 18-year-old today is very different from an 18-year-old 20 years ago? Raise your, okay, because I'm noticing this difference, okay? And one of the things, and I don't want to spend all the time talking about why that has happened, but I think the majority of us in agreement that there has been a big change, right? You've seen, I don't know if you've ever seen the meme of the 18-year-old soldier in World War II and then the 18-year-old with the man bun, in the coffee shop. That kind of change that has taken place. And one of the things that we decided to do in AIM is we said, we're not going to wring our hands and be frustrated that today's youth aren't as mature as they used to be. What we're going to do is we're going to be an answer to the problem. And so we adopted what's called a better late than never approach, and we're just starting from scratch in a lot of ways with these young men and women that we're receiving. I'll give you an example. I went through AIM back in 1996, okay? And back in 1996, whenever we arrived on our first day of AIM, everybody knew the books of the Bible. Everybody already knew the main stories in the Old Testament. Everybody knew the main stories in the New Testament, and that was because of what the church as a whole in all of our locations were doing. Sycamore is a very good, healthy place of growing up young men and women in that area. The truth is, when we receive our students, I would say about half of them don't even know the books of the Bible. How many of you're like shocked to hear that? Yeah. They don't know the main stories in the Bible. You might be talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're like, what are you talking about? And what has happened is across the board in the United States, they aren't giving an emphasis to Bible teaching like they used to. And so you have these young men and women who have a genuine drive to follow God, but they don't have the training that they used to get, or they don't have the Bible knowledge that they used to get. And so we actually, when the Aimers come in, we're teaching them like survey of the New Testament, survey of the Old Testament, learning the books of the Bible. And we didn't do that 20 years ago. Because why didn't we do it 20 years ago is because they came already knowing that. And so we just said, you know what? We're going to have this approach better late than never, and we're going to teach those things. But one of the things that I've noticed is they catch up really quickly, okay, because of the time that we're putting into that. And it is a reminder to me that our job is to grow. One of the passages that I really like in the New Testament is Romans 1:16, okay? I am not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that whenever I ask the question, what are some things that might make you ashamed of the gospel? Because Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God for salvation of everyone who believes. And students all over the United States, whenever I ask that question, they'll say things like, I feel like I don't know enough about the Bible. I feel like people are going to think I'm a hypocrite. I feel like some people are going to know my past, and they're like, how can you be a Christian based on your past? And they begin to say all of these different things. And then I say, okay, hold up a sec. Because the question I asked was, why are you ashamed? Why would you be ashamed of the gospel? Okay, because here, and this is where we get lost in this, because shame comes whenever we put a standard on something and it doesn't measure up. Okay, so for example, are you guys Volunteer fans? Tennessee Volunteer? I see a lot of the orange. Okay, so this would be an illustration of shame. Is I put a standard on Tennessee, on the Volunteers, that they're going to win the football game. Okay, so what's the standard I put on them? That they'll win the football game. So when they don't win, how do I feel? Ashamed, because they didn't measure up to the standard that I put on it. Okay, so then whenever I ask these students, why might you be ashamed of the gospel? And then they begin to say all of these different reasons. Did you know that none of those answers have anything to do with the gospel? Right? Because they actually put the standard on the gospel. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is what? The power of God for salvation of everyone who believes. So what is the standard that is put on the gospel? Yeah, it's the power of God. So then we have to ask our question, is the gospel the power of God for salvation of everyone who believes? Is it? It is, so we can't be ashamed. And so then once we set that is like, look, that we can't be ashamed of the gospel because the gospel does the thing that it says it would do, but really what we're here for is to work on those things that you mentioned. Right? I don't know enough. My former life is going to prevent me from being effective. People are going to think that I'm a hypocrite, and so I want to change that. And so he said, so this is why you're here. You're not here to make the gospel better. You can't make the gospel better. The gospel is what it is, and it does what it says it would do. But we aren't who we need to be. And whenever we focus on us, and that's what I really appreciated about the sermon this morning, is when we focus on us, really what God is doing is He is turning us into an instrument that makes us better equipped to actually present the gospel that does the very thing that it was always intended to do. The reason why the gospel doesn't spread like it should has nothing to do with the gospel and has everything to do with who? With us. And so that's why we focus on us. Okay? I love... one of the things that I like to say to our students is Jesus didn't say a lot of things. He said a few things a lot of times. Okay? Like I'll give you an example. How many of you guys remember Jesus saying, follow me? Well, you know he didn't say that one time. He actually says that over 20 times. Okay? If Jesus says something one time, should we pay attention to it? If Jesus says something 20 times, should we really pay attention to it? And so Jesus says, follow me. And really, that's the approach that we have with our AIM students. And I think it's a good approach for us in our walk with the Lord is that we focus on following Him. Even in Jesus' last words to His disciples, He said, go make what? Disciples. What is a disciple? A follower, right? And so when Jesus says, follow me, He just says, hey, I want you to follow me, and as you follow me, I want you to make followers. And isn't it crazy that that is the plan that Jesus has for this world to reach the gospel? That there isn't a plan B. That God, in all of his wisdom, because in my mindset, I think, man, that seems like a pretty foolish idea, God, to choose human beings to share this message with other human beings. Why wouldn't you just choose angels to do it? Why wouldn't you just have like a big billboard in the sky that says, obey the gospel? Couldn't God make like a big cloud sign, and everybody just goes outside and looks at it and just says, obey. But he doesn't do that. He chose imperfect human beings to go into all the world and share the gospel with other people. And one of the things that I've gotten really passionate about in the last several years is emphasizing things that are simple and reproducible. Okay, so everything that we try to teach to our aimers, we try to teach them concepts that are simple and reproducible. In fact, in some places I say, if you can't just write it out on a napkin, then it's probably not worth doing. We want to teach teachings that are simple and reproducible. Why do we want to do that? Because we want to teach in a way where they're able to hear it and put it into practice right away. And so, how many of you guys would raise your hands and be like, man, it's difficult to be a follower of Jesus? You guys, I feel like when I look, I'm like, man, there's like a million things that I have to do to be a follower of Jesus. And one of the things that I love about the Word of God, if we're really emphasizing being a follower of Jesus, did you know that in the Gospel of John, in fact, it's only in John, Jesus says 3 times in 3 different places, if you do X, you're really my disciples. Did you guys know that? And so I want you to think about this. How many of us want to be disciples of Jesus? Okay? How many of us would be really excited if Jesus just paved the way and he said, you want to be my disciples? If you do X, you're really my disciples. And if we do this, we just know we're doing the right job. How many of you guys think that'd be pretty easy? Right? So he does that. Go with me to John chapter 8. John chapter 8. And it's in verses 31 and 32. Jesus says, if you hold to my word, or depending what translation you're reading, if you hold to my teaching, if you hold to my word, you are really my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So, according to this passage in John chapter 8, if I want to be a follower of Jesus, what do I need to do? Yeah, abide in his word, right? And so, okay, I want to be a follower of Jesus. I don't know how to do that. And Jesus says, if you just hold to my word, or you abide to my word, or you obey my teachings, you're really my disciples. How do we know what Jesus' teachings are? We've got to read the Bible, right? And so if we're not in the book, we're not going to know what his teachings are, okay? And that's part of the application for us is the more that I'm in his teachings, the more I'm going to hear what that is. But if I obey his teachings, I'm really a follower of his, okay? The second place he does this is in John chapter 13. In John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, he says this. He says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. So according to this passage here, if I want to be a follower of Jesus, what will I do? What will I do? We'll love one another, and we're not just going to love each other. How are we going to love each other? Like he loved us, right? Now that's a different kind of love, right? It's not just Corey loving how he'd love his brother. It's me loving how Christ has loved me. that Christ died for my sins. Now that's like a different kind of love, right? But Jesus says, if you love each other like I've loved you, what does that mean I'm being? What am I being? A disciple, right? And so not only am I going to be faithful to his word, I'm also going to love others as he loved me. And then there's the third place. It's in John chapter 15. John chapter 15 is when Jesus says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. But in this context, in verse 8, he says, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. So according to this passage here, if I want to be a disciple of Jesus, what will I do? I'll bear fruit, right? What does that look like? What does it mean to bear fruit in my life to show that I'm a follower of Jesus? Okay, your deeds, right? And this is something that's super important for us, that we can't just be talking about being a follower of Jesus. We have to have something to show for being a follower of Jesus. I think one of the tensions that we have in the world is that the church has a lot to say, but they don't really have as much to show for being a follower of Jesus. And I think that that's something very important for us, is that we have fruit in our life that actually shows that we're followers of Jesus. Now, this is the thing that I love about Jesus. How many of you guys think Jesus is really smart? Okay? This is what I love about, and if you hear hands up, nope, he's not. But he is. Jesus is really smart, and this is what I love about Jesus is he actually makes life simpler for us. So what we tell our students, and what I would say to you, is don't be thinking about a million things that you need to be doing to be a follower of Jesus. Just be thinking about 3. What would your life look like if you just said, my life's about 3 things? Holding true to his word, loving others as he's loved me, and bearing fruit showing that I'm a follower of Jesus. Okay, think about, and this is the thing that I think is so awesome about Jesus. Think about anything that you would do as a follower of Jesus. Is there anything that you would do as a follower of Jesus that doesn't fall into one of those 3 things? Can you think of anything? I can't either, and I've been trying. Anything that I would do as a follower of Jesus is going to fall into one of those 3 areas. And so what it does for me, it allows me to simplify my life, to say, Corey, what's your life about? Man, my life as a follower of Jesus is about 3 things. I'm going to hold true to his word. I'm going to love others as he's loved me. And I'm going to bear fruit in my life showing that I'm a follower of Jesus. And so that's all I do. And so we actually have developed with our AIM students their calendar. So their weekly schedule is broken up into 3 categories of their life. We call it word, body, lost. Okay? The word, holding faithful to the teachings of Jesus. Body is me being faithful to what I'm doing one another. Love one another, right? Love one another as I've loved you. That's the body, right? And the lost is, what is the fruit that I'm producing in my life that is actually reaching a lost world? And so the Aimers, every week, they turn in their schedule, and it is broken into 3 categories. What have you done in the Word? What have you done for the body? What have you done for the lost? And they turn in that calendar, that schedule, every Monday. And so they turn it in on Monday, and they have AIM assistants that work with them and who are mentoring with them. And they look over that calendar, and then they turn it again in on Monday, and they show, this is what your plan was. What did you actually do? So you have your projected schedule, right? And then your actual schedule. How many of you guys have made a projected schedule and the whole week went exactly how you planned? That has never happened in my entire life, right? But you still have a plan. And so we want the Aimers to learn, look, you're going to accomplish more for the kingdom if you actually have a plan, but your plan never goes as planned. And so we want to see what you actually did. And it's amazing to me just with these little tools like this, how quickly it begins to change them, where their focus in life isn't about what do I want to do, but it's like, what am I doing for the Lord? What am I doing as a follower of Jesus? And I love that simple teaching. And what it goes back to for me is this ability to really make what is important for Jesus important in my life as well. Right? As I grow closer to Jesus, the things that are most important to him become most important to me. And as I grow closer to Jesus, the things that Jesus hates, I hate all the more. Does that make sense? And so as we seek to follow Jesus, man, these three things have been a game changer for me. And it's been a game changer for the Amers, and I hope that it could be a game changer for you as you seek to follow Jesus more closely. How many of you guys think that this week you could take some time to say, what am I going to do this week to really hold true to Jesus' word? What am I going to do this week to really love others as Jesus has really loved me? And what am I going to do this week to bear fruit in my life, showing that I'm a follower of Jesus? How many of you guys think you could just, if you did one thing in each of those categories, how many of you guys think you could do that? Okay? If you do that, it's automatically putting you in a place where you're a better follower of Jesus. And this is the thing that I want to close with, is you being a follower of Jesus and the better follower of Jesus that you are, and I'm going to say this grammatically incorrect so it sticks with you, doesn't make you more saveder. Okay, you're not more saved the more you follow Jesus. Do you guys get that, right? But the more you follow Jesus, the better instrument you become to actually reach this world for Christ. Going all the way back to Jesus' last words before his ascension, he said, go make disciples of all nations, because that's what was most important to him. And if we're making disciples of all nations like Jesus asked us to, we're actually being the instrument for his purposes being fulfilled. If the ultimate goal was just for us to be saved, we would just go to heaven the second we were baptized. Have you thought about that? The reason why we don't go straight to heaven right after we're baptized is because he has a purpose for us to go make more disciples. So the more we're focused on being a disciple, the better ability we have to reach this world for Christ. I was told to be done at 11:10, and it's 11:11. So I will stop. But it has been good to be with you guys this morning. Thank you so much. Yes, so the first one is hold faithful to his word or to his teaching, and that's John 8:31. The second is love others as he's loved us. That's John 13:34 and 35. And the third one is bear fruit, showing to be a disciple. And that's John 15:8. So all three of them are in John. And it's the only places where Jesus says, if you do this, you're really my disciples. You can go to Luke 14 and he says, if you don't do this, you can't be my disciples, but that's how not to be a disciple. We're talking about how to be a disciple. So thank you very much.